This is a GK Media podcast. I'm delighted to be joined on Business Bytes today by founder and CEO Richard Parker. Richard, thank you for joining me all the way from Southeast Florida.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Yeah, we're a little distance from one another, and I really appreciate you having me.
No, delighted. I was talking to someone in business this week, and they have set up an investment company because they said a lot of people at the moment are cash rich. Now, that could be debatable for quite a few people, but there are those who are cash rich, certainly since COVID as well, when there was a lot of money spinning around economies. And he has set up investment companies to basically help those who have a passive income who want to turn it into an investment. And it leads into an interesting conversation as to what we were having before we started recording the podcast here today. Was you talking about, this is a good time now for people to consider buying into a business. Talk to me about that.
I disagree with one point. I don't think it's a good time. I think it's an unbelievably good time right now. And it's what I actually term as beautiful upheaval. There's so many things going on, individual components within the economy that normally each one on its own would lend itself to being attractive for the buy side of acquisitions, meaning interest rates going up. Now, some people may say, well, interest rates going up, that will cause the leverage or the cost of capital to increase. And while that is true, what that does is it removes a lot of people from the buyer pool who just have some fear. Oh, no, I'm not going to buy a business. Look at the cost of capital and interest rates. And I'm talking on the lower side, not institutional investors, because the industry of buying business is always swamped with people that are looking. They won't buy. 90+% will never buy, but they're looking, and they just muddy the waters, if you will. And so increased interest rates removes a lot of those people. Then you reference COVID, even though we're past that time. During the COVID years and subsequently for the few years after, the business activity, some businesses did terrific in COVID, other ones did terrible, some were stable, etc. But that inconsistency during that period and coming out of it, you look at it and say, well, I don't really know what the numbers are of the past. Like going forward, I really can't pull from the immediate past of the business's performance to determine what the future looks like. So why is that good for buyers? Well, if you're looking to buy a business and you can't have a comfort level with consistency of earnings based on that, the COVID impact, then you say, well, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, I'm willing to buy your business, but we need to have a big piece of this deal that's performance-based because I need to know what this business is going to look like in 12, 24, and 36 months. And the past does not give me any indication of the future. So that in turn helps buyers because you get these performance-based deals. Right. So that part of it is really positive. And the other thing is that's been this looming threat of a recession. Now, I've been hearing this forever, and I can't even tell you what the definition of a recession is. All I know is there's a lot of people that have less money in their pocket than they did a while ago, certainly stateside. But this idea of a recession causes concern for a lot of people who, again, remove themselves from the market of buying a business. Less buyers on the market equals a buyer's market. It's not a seller's market. So all these individual things, it's combined. It's the aggregate of all of it. I think it's just beautiful upheaval. And so to me, I'm like more energized for people and I've been doing this for 34 years. This is just a golden time.
And with having the great resignation taking place during and post COVID, are you finding that there's a lot of businesses now that just want to sell up, that they want to take early retirement as such?
Well, you have that part of it, which impacts a little less on the lower end. That's usually for larger businesses. But when you add that piece to the fact of what we call in America, the silver tsunami, all these baby boomers that are coming, that are turning 65 and going to be retiring, and most of them don't have a succession plan. So you have this, a lot of them are looking and say, you know what, like, I don't need this heartburn anymore. Like I'm ready to go, right? And they're approaching their age. So you have this mass influx of businesses that are going to be on the market or sellers that, may not even know how they can exit their business. So again, it's a great point that you brought up, which is the amount of businesses that are going to be for sale, which is good because it'll start to depress the multiples, which got, inflated incorrectly during the boom years
Yeah.
pre-COVID. In the lower market where multiples usually never have gone up for decades, they went a little crazy. Now we're seeing them come down. Everything is starting to normalize, which is a good thing.
But it's interesting when you mention recession, because that's usually a time when everyone just completely holds back, if not freezes, from doing any significant form of investment or spend. But you're saying the opposite.
Yes, absolutely. When there's, to me, the greatest opportunity is when there's blood in the streets. Now, there's not blood in the streets now, but there's certainly a trickle. And so, I believe that true entrepreneurs, they look at this as an opportunity. It's always, and it goes back. I mean, I'm not comparing myself to Warren Buffett by any means, but when people are selling, you buy. When people are buying, you sell. I mean, that's been a theory of his for years. And when you adapt that to the lower market, which is something that I've been teaching and preaching for decades, is when there's opportunities, entrepreneurs recognize them. The individuals that are going to sit on their hands or move to the sideline, they'll just find any excuse not to do it. And I'm not trying to be disparaging to those individuals. I'm just saying if you have any inkling of interest to get into a business, you have to take advantage of opportunistic times within the economy. And now is one of them. That's, if you don't, then don't deem yourself to be entrepreneurial. It's the opposite. I understand the fear and concern, but recessions don't last long. I mean, good times always last far longer than bad times. So there may be a dip, and that's just part of the world of operating a business. Now, clearly, you don't want to go into a business that's going to take a massive hit during a recession, but you can solve for that. Meaning, if you're looking at a particular type of business, I don't care, let's just pull something out of the hat, a commercial cleaning company. Well, you can go and stress test that idea and look back to 2008, the year 2000, and prior to that and say, do your research and say, how did commercial landscaping businesses or commercial cleaning businesses do during recessionary times? So the data is available. And, again, coming back to the original question is, this is an opportunistic time. This is not the time to sit on the sidelines. I understand the fears, but they're actually not justified in my view.
But would it not be better to buy during a recession if you are cash rich rather than when inflation is so high at the moment?
I think that's a valid point. And especially if you're cash rich, I think you don't want to try to time this.
And I understand that you need to be cash rich because when there's a recession, there's no loans coming out.
Well, there's no loans coming out. And, there's such a discrepancy between countries. I mean, you're talking, I'm speaking from the States, you're overseas, or maybe I'm overseas compared to where you are, but one of us is overseas. And
well, there's a sea between us, all right.
The pond is big enough. And yes, I mean, that happens where people are concerned about cost of capital. And if there is some money now, I guess the larger point that I want to convey to people is there's always an excuse. There's always a reason. There's always something looming on the horizon. And so you have to, not eliminate that. You have to consider that, of course, but you can solve for it. I just don't believe the concept of keep waiting till something happens in order to incentivize you to acquire a business is the right approach. It's never proven to be it's never proven to be a valid approach. The other approach is you look at this, perhaps you could say, well, I want to measure things over 3 or 4 months. I get that, but it's certainly not to take a stance of, well, I'm going to see how things, settle out, because who knows when that's going to be. If you are cash rich, the thing is you can leverage the money now because some banks aren't lending as they once were. Certain things like we do in America, which are really starting to take hold in the UK as examples, seller financing. In the lower end, seller financing is in our clients, 90% of the deals. 91% of our clients get seller financing, not for the whole deal, but a significant portion of it. And we're starting to see that bleed into deals in the UK, actually.
Explain seller financing to me, Richard.
Okay, so let's say you buy, I'll give you an example. You buy a business, you agree on a purchase price of $1 million. Well, you're not giving it's not like you have to come with $1 million to write a check to give to the seller. There could be a component of bank financing. Maybe the individual puts up a couple £100,000 and gets bank financing for the balance. That's because the banks are shrinking and tightening up. What's happening now is that same buyer may put down a couple $100,000. The bank is only willing to lend $300,000. Now you're at $500,000. The seller carries a balance of sale note. And so the seller acts as a bank. and they effectively, you pay them off through the proceeds of the company's profit, same as you would a bank. And what's happening, and it's been this way in America for many, many years, and it's starting to see this happen in the UK, because the reality is when the banks tighten up, people may have cash, but they want to get some leverage. The only way to get the deals to the finish line in the lower market is the seller carrying a note. They have no choice. If not, they can't sell, because that $1 million at closing is just not happening.
And are they charging interest then?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yep. Oh, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, the interest rate is usually lower. The terms can be flexible. The nice thing about it is if, for example, the business runs into any difficulty, well, if you have a loan with a bank, they don't care what your story is. They're just taking the business or putting you out of business. If you have a loan with a seller, the first thing is a seller note. Why I love them is it is the greatest way for the seller to validate everything that they've represented about the business, because they've got, as we say here, skin in the game.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, maybe over Ireland, you say you got the cojones in the game, right? I mean, okay, but they've got risk. And the buyer takes the biggest part of the risk in these transactions. So, getting the seller involved in that is important. So yes, they'll charge an interest rate. It's typically below the rate of the bank, and you may have extended terms. But one thing that happens, if the business runs into any trouble, you can always negotiate with the seller. You may have to bring them in to help you. You could defer the loan. What I tell my clients to do, and what they've been very successful at doing, is at the beginning, you can get a holiday from even paying the note for the first year. So that gives you a little bit of breathing room.
Brilliant.
Or you have no interest, or you have interest only for a year. So you have tons of flexibility. When you borrow money from the bank, they'll tell you what the terms are.
Yeah.
When you borrow money from a seller, you can negotiate that. So it's just starting to happen in the UK. It's more prevalent in other countries, and is very prominent in the United States, North America, Canada. It's going to have to take hold. There won't be any choice. That's the only way sellers, especially with all these people retiring, they won't have, if not, they're just going to have to lock the doors and leave their business.
Talk to me about buying a business. What does one need to plan out or think of? Like, I know one doesn't need to know the ins and outs of a business that they're buying, but at the same time, what sort of strategic action should they be taking when getting ready to buy a business?
Okay, so let me first take you back a little bit and tell you what the numbers are, because they're so abysmal. So people need to understand this. It's 94%. We always refer to it as the 90%ers, call it over 90%, but it's 94% of the people who begin the search to buy a business never complete a transaction.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Now, to someone who is a layman, if you will, doesn't understand why, the explanation, I'm doing this for 34 years, to me, it's as clear as day, which is because people jump into this process. Maybe they're pissed off at their boss, or they think they want to change their life, whatever reason they decide to start looking at businesses. They go into this thinking that somehow the process of acquiring a business in some way, shape, or form is similar to buying property. And it's not. They are the only thing that has in common is you're buying something. They're not aligned. There's nothing in common. They're nothing whatsoever. So they have this misconception of how they go about it. They'll get a broker. They'll help them find businesses. They'll take them by the hand and look at companies. They'll help them and dispense unbiased advice. Nothing could be further from the truth. So what happens is you have a ton of business for sale websites where people are publicly listing their businesses for sale. And that's only a small portion of what's for sale. And they jump in, they start looking at all kinds of businesses, sending in potentially inquiries, and they try to, and then they try to figure out which, if any of those, may be right for them. And it's the wrong approach. So they spend months and months looking. Sellers don't answer them. Brokers may not answer. They get the numbers. They check the numbers. They don't check out with what's real. And so they become very frustrated, overwhelmed, or then they get into conversations with sellers. They don't know what questions to ask. They don't know how to do the due diligence. They don't know how to value a business. So they're attacking this with absolutely no knowledge, no expertise, no track record, or no experience. And they think that somehow they're going to get to the finish line. It's craziness. And so, but the successful buyers, and in our case, actually compared to that 94%, 82% of our clients who follow our course and use our consulting buy a business within the first 6 months. The difference is only one thing: they acquire a knowledge base to start. And so they start out as an expert. They may not be an expert at buying businesses, but they've really equipped themselves with the information they need. They understand the path. They understand the process. They understand what questions to ask, how to go about value of business. How do you investigate and analyze the business? How do you investigate the competition? How do you investigate the industry? So if you start off knowing something, you're way ahead of the game. It's like anything else that you want to do, any major project. It's like if you're booking a vacation with your family and this is the vacation of a lifetime, and you've waited 10 years to have this vacation. Well, you have the conversation, you decide where you think you may want to go, you start investigating the different destinations, you start looking at Airbnbs and hotels and flights and whatever, and you look for other people who may have gone to these areas. You start to inform yourself. You don't just go to the airport with a bag of cash and go up to the ticket counter and say, we want to go on your next flight. You may wind up in Iraq, right? So it's like and that's what happens with people. They just don't know what the heck they're doing. And so the first thing is the knowledge base, and then understanding what type of business is right for you, because you've got to buy a business that marries perfectly with your skill set. That's critically important. So the first thing is knowledge or lack thereof. So acquire it, and it's easy. And I'm not giving you a self-serving testimonial promotion for our course. I'm just telling you the reality of how they need to go about doing this. The second thing is understanding, what type of business is right for them, marrying their skill set. And the third thing why people fail, or how to understand going about it, there's no such thing as a perfect business.
True.
You think business it's an existing business, it has blemishes and warts or what have you. You want to solve for the problems. Obviously, if the problems are too large, or if there's huge customer concentration, you don't buy it. But those are really the three components that prevents people from successfully completing this journey, which I will tell you it's not difficult. It's just complex, and anybody can do it. You just have to do this in a good way.
Would it be fair to say that it's more important to find a business that meets, we'll say, your core values than even your skill set?
I think it's twofold.
Okay.
I think the skill set is first. And clearly, if it doesn't meet with your core values, or especially if it's in conflict with your core values, then you won't buy it. But the top of the pyramid, when you're looking, has to be buying a business that marries your skill set. Then all these other things, like you entered marrying, aligning with your core values, you obviously have to weigh that into the equation, because if it doesn't, you don't do it. But the top of the list, the single most important, there's 23 steps in the business buying process. If you screw up all of them to a certain degree, but you buy a business that's perfectly suited to your skill set, by and large, you're going to be okay. Conversely, if you buy a business that's not right for you, it doesn't matter if you did everything else correctly. It'll go south in a hurry.
Okay, so what you're saying is interesting, because it's opposite to what another investor that I know has said, where his opinion is, I don't need to know anything about a business. I'm just going in there and I'm buying it, and it's going to just operate as it normally does Monday to Friday. But what you're saying is, to me, is interesting as well, because you're saying it's better to actually know about the business, where you're bringing your skills to a business that match the skills, that.
Yes, no, I get it perfectly. So there's two things, because there is validity to what that individual said. The scenario has to be painted properly, meaning if I'm an investor going in to acquire a business where I'm keeping the management in place, or the owner may be remaining in a more of a minority equity position, then yes, I don't need to know the inner workings of that business. I don't need to have it in the guts of in my belly of how it operates. That's the entire world of private equity. They're not operators. Most of these private equity guys couldn't operate a lemonade stand, right? But because they're betting on the jockey, not the horse. They don't need to be. They're not operational. So the investor that you reference, he or she is correct if they're strictly an investor, but they're not an operator.
Okay,
that is absolutely correct. However, if you are an operator, if you're buying the business where and the lower market is where it happens, where the owner leaves, you take their chair. You're the owner operator. Then your skill set better make damn sure that your skill set marries what that business needs. So there is, I agree wholeheartedly what he said. It's just the relationship of whether or not it's a pure investment, or whether or not you're going to be operational.
Yeah, and I suppose, in fairness, when you are operational, you can steer the ship more in the direction that you need, especially if you see an area of growth. You can push more towards that area.
Yes, absolutely.
And then in terms of, the knowledge base that one needs, this is where the M&A course comes in.
Yes, correct. And we've been, the nice thing about what we do, I wrote this material based on a transaction that went sour. My whole goal is at that point, I'd looked at hundreds and hundreds of companies, and I always kept phenomenal notes. I'm neurotic when it comes to organization and notes. And in every deal, what happened, because I love the learning component. What happened when I did this? Here's what happened, or here's what I discovered. Here's how we try to solve it. So I had phenomenal notes, and I decided to put them in course because I had a business that went sour, and I recognized that the average person would have bought that business. It's only because I'm not that smart. It's only because I've been doing it a long time that I recognize where the skeletons are, where the problems were, and I was able to uncover them. The average person would have never found them. And so I put all the materials together with the idea of I just want to help one person either buy the right business or avoid buying the wrong one. And I felt it would be nice to memorialize my years of work. And if you would have told me back then that over the course of time, I'm going to sell 100,000 copies of this, I would tell you, you need to get your head examined. There's no way. I never thought it was going to turn into a business. And so the whole agenda that I went into this remains the same. As I just get up every morning to help people. I mean, I don't do this for the money. If I never sell another program, my standard of living, I thank God I've had a terrific career, and I've purchased 14 companies. I've exited 13 of them. I've done really, really well. I'm very, very lucky. I'm really blessed. And my whole agenda is just to help people. And so even I let people email me, or we jump onto calls. I never even charge them. And I do this all day long and help people. We've sold this into over 80 countries. So it's,
Wow.
The knowledge base, and it comes from a real sincere position. And again, if you go to our website, richardparker.com, we have hundreds of articles that people could read and special reports if they want to inform themselves. So, I appreciate you mentioning the course. I never have these conversations as leverage to sell the material.
Yeah.
If it makes sense for people. But having said that, I'll tell you that if someone is interested in buying a business, they owe it to themselves to be informed. And if they think they're going to do it on their own without the knowledge base, without the experience, without the expertise, or the right information, they should have their head examined, because all they're going to do is run into a brick wall. And similarly, they don't need to get with these courses that people are, these self-anointed gurus promoting these courses that teach you how to buy businesses for no money down, making hundreds of thousands of dollars. Excuse my French. That's all complete bullshit. It's really ridiculous. And spending thousands of dollars. Some spend $25,000. I mean, you got to be nuts. You don't need it. So I just operate from a position as I've been very lucky, and I'd love to see people duplicate what I've been able to accomplish. And we have stories of people, and what they've been able to achieve is just absolutely fascinating. So yeah, I mean, it's I'm very proud of the material because it's changed a lot of lives.
Super. And in terms of someone who might be based in Europe, because I say a lot of these companies that are I don't know a website in Ireland that publicly lists businesses that are up for sale.
Businessesforsale.com.
Okay. And are they mostly American businesses?
No. It's actually businessesforsale.com is a UK based company. But they do have a component that offers US based business, Canadian based business, I think South African based business, but certainly related to, the United Kingdom. Yeah, they have, I'm not sure if there's a specific tab for Ireland, but yes, I mean, they start, and they're one of the largest in the world. They do have this whole component related to, UK based companies. So there you go. See, if anything, all the time on the call was worth that, right? You got to lead.
Absolutely, because I do think if people start scrolling a website like that and something grabs their attention, something bites, sparks their interest, that's then when they make the next step and say, okay, I need to build my knowledge base. Richard's the man to help me out,
Well, it's exactly that. What happens for, we always ask the question of people, okay, if you go through that process exactly as you've described it, so you find something online, you send in an inquiry, and then I always ask people, okay, now what, smart ass? What are you going to do now? You've sent in this inquiry. The seller is going to respond to you. Okay, what are you planning on doing? Do you know what questions to ask them? Do you know what information to look for? Do you know what documents that you should or shouldn't sign? Do you know what information you should be giving to them? How much you should disclose? I mean, so great, you send an inquiry. Now the fun begins. It's like, gentlemen, start your engines, right? I mean, that's when this all begins. And so, yes, that's exactly the point. You want to be, you want to be prepared. Similarly, while the business for sale websites have a ton of companies that are available for sale, that only represents a tiny portion of the businesses that are actually for sale in any location, because by and large, the business brokers control those business for sale websites overseas or in US, and business brokers only sell around 10% of all businesses that are sold or transacted. So there's 90% of the companies that go outside that. So how are you going to find them? I'll tell you how to find them. I mean, there's a methodology to doing that. And it's, yes, I mean, you can get started in this process by going in the business for sale websites, but to make progress, you need that you need the knowledge. I mean, you need to know what to do. Like anything else in life, any other project you want to embark upon, you've got to get informed with the right information.
I think it's fantastic because there's, people who always want to own their own bar, their own toy shop, their own hair salon, whatever. But, the reality is starting off a business is extremely hard. If you can find a business out there that can show on the books that it is working, it is a success, but maybe they need more investment, maybe they want early retirement, whatever, at least you're going into a model that hopefully on paper is working successfully, rather than going through that whole slog for the first 5 to 10 years of trying to get up and running.
Yes, absolutely. And the concept, if you buy a good business, if you do this the right way, you should get the keys to the place on Monday and be able to take a paycheck on Friday.
Yeah.
Versus a startup. I mean, in a startup, everything sounds great because you haven't proven anything or disproven anything. You don't even have paper clips. I mean, you have nothing in this business. Yeah. So yes, buying a solid, stable business that you can go in, learn, apply your skills, grow the business. I mean, you are so much further ahead. Yeah. It's not even close. And when you look at the numbers, ultimately what it costs to fund a startup versus what it costs to acquire a business, when you look at the 5-year window, because 96%, I mean, those were the latest stats I read, 96% of all startups fail in the first 5 years. When you look at the cost of getting that business going versus acquiring one, there's not that big a difference.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, absolutely. Richard, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. I've learned so much. And I think for anyone listening, hopefully it has put a spark in them who have maybe been thinking about this over the last number of years, that now they know what direction that they can go in. And simply go to that website, businessesforsale.com.
That's where you'll see some, that's where you'll see some publicly listed businesses for sale, correct.
And then after that, you need to start Googling and go to richardparker.com.
I mean, if you're really, really smart, you go to richardparker.com first.
Sure.
Well, I appreciate that's actually great advice. If people can, you just said that people can dip their toe in the water, and get a little flavor. And I just always believe that if you have any type of interest in the world of entrepreneurship, at least there's so much. Make sure you get to good information, but at least you owe it to yourself to at least explore whether or not it makes sense for you. You don't necessarily have to do it, but you certainly, I believe, you owe it to yourself to take the steps to say, hey, learn about it, right? Learn about this whole world, whatever that may be, franchises, startups, buying an existing business, etc. Learn about a bunch of different things and then decide if you want to do any of them. Yeah. But take the step to at least learn about it in a meaningful way.
Absolutely. Richard, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it was great. I thank you for having me, and I love the questions, and hopefully we provided a little bit of help to your listeners. Thanks again.